Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, Beyond the Bengal Tiger. Meet India's lesser-known mammals. Presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Surya Ramachandran. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. Surya, take it away.
Thank you, Rob. Hello, everyone. This is me. I'm sorry about my webcam being down today. I have pretty bad weather conditions in India, so there's no power at home at the moment. So my internet is a little low. And because of that, I just want this to run smoothly. So I've kept my webcam down. But that is me. For those of you who want to know how I look, I'm sure that's the least interesting part of this presentation. But still, that's the first one. This is something which I find very interesting to speak about, especially because a lot of our the grand wildlife trips that we do across the world are focused on charismatic megafauna, right? We speak about tigers, snow leopards in India, elephants, rhinos. If we go to Sri Lanka, we speak about leopards. If we go to Africa, we speak about the big five, but there is so much more happening in each of these habitats, like so much more, which are equally interesting, equally fascinating, but unfortunately a lot of people know so less about. I mean, these are the kind of animals that naturalists like me seek out when we go to places, because the bigger ones are usually a lot more easier to see. So, what are the India's least known secretive mammals? It's a big list because in India we have over 540 different mammals, if you can imagine that. But that includes different kinds of rodents and bats as well. We have over 80 to 100 species of bats, so that's a big list in itself. But nevertheless, over 500 mammal species is quite interesting. So I really had to put a lot of thought into figuring out which ones to showcase here. So I'm going to talk about some of them briefly and then a little bit more in detail about some others so that you get kind of like a rough picture of my select few least known mammals from India. And this is the first one. This one is called the Malabar civet. Why do I have a drawing here by my friend Satyan and not an actual picture? Because this mammal has been a mystery in India for the last 100 years. So all we know about this mammal is called the Malabar civet, along the coast, but never actually found the animal even on camera trap. So this animal has always been a big mystery for us. And then later it was found, or in a way proven, that this mammal is the same as the Malay civet, which is from Peninsula Malaysia and Borneo. So that civet was being transported to the Middle East for perfume making, because civets have a particular gland from where they can secrete a particular musk, which was used to make perfumes. So possibly the Malay civets were stopped on the port in India, and some of them got away, and that is how the story of the Malabar civet possibly originated. So this is probably the rarest mammal in India because possibly it doesn't exist. But unfortunately, no one can conclusively prove that this is the same as that because no one has a specimen except a few skins that are there with hunters. And of course, a secretive mammal all over the world, different kinds of pangolins in Africa, India, Southeast Asia, they're all secretive. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of this animal, the pangolin or the scaly anteater. They're pretty large animals. They have this very keratin-based scales on their body, which are very hard. And like an armadillo, they can also roll into a ball to protect themselves. And like the name says, anteater, they eat termites and ants, and they're excellent diggers and climbers to get to these ant nests, which they feed on. They're extremely nocturnal animals, extremely secretive. I've seen one in my last 15 years of roaming Indian jungles, just one. I know people who worked in India for over 20 years and never seen any. So how they manage to remain unseen by most people is incredible, because they're not a rare animal, but they're just very hard to see. But unfortunately, the situation is not normal. It is getting worse and worse these days, because of the amount of pangolin poaching that's happening for the Southeast Asian market, where they use the scales for as a cure for different things, and pangolin meat is supposed to be a cure for rheumatism. So they have all kinds of these beliefs. Unfortunately, tons and tons of pangolins are being poached and sent out by crates from Africa, India, Southeast Asia. And this is probably the most trafficked animal in the world right now. People always talk about tiger poaching and things like that. But currently, this animal, the Indian pangolin, the Chinese pangolin, the Sunda pangolin, the African pangolin, the black-bellied pangolin in Congo, they're all the most poached, trafficked animal in the world right now. So the future is not looking great for the pangolin. But nevertheless, if it remains to stay elusive and shy from us, I hope it is able to do that with the poachers as well. So this animal, which you see, very very cute animal, swimming with its belly up in the air on the Indus River in the Himalayas. We see the Eurasian otter during our snow leopard trips, and that is the only place where we can see them within India conclusively. This is high up in the Himalayas where we look for snow leopards. We have a very very small population of Eurasian otters there. These otters actually found from the Himalayas in the northern tip of India all the way till Scotland. So it has a great wide range, but very few people know that it's actually found in India. And something very interesting about this otter is it is found in the Himalayas, not most of India, and then again it is found all over Sri Lanka. How this otter managed to get to Sri Lanka by avoiding most of India remains a big mystery. We don't know how, but this otter again is a very rare animal in India because it stays in these high altitude mountain rivers. You see them very rarely, and also a lot of the Himalayan rivers are being dammed right now, so for hydroelectricity production, and that affects the movement of fish, which in turn affects the otters. So another very rare animal. I get more excited when I see them on the Ladakh trips, because we probably see them once or twice a year out of the 16 groups we do for snow leopards. Snow leopards we see in all of them, but otters maybe once or twice. Probably one of my most favorite animals in India is the striped hyena. Uh, Such a beautiful animal, beautiful stripe pattern, longer forelegs, shorter hind legs, a nice ruff of hair coming down the back of its head, and just a very beautiful animal. Unfortunately, most of the world doesn't perceive hyenas as beautiful, but I think as compared to at least the spotted hyena in Africa, the striped hyena is very beautiful. But interestingly, the striped hyena is also found in East Africa, North Africa, India, and parts of Central Asia. So it's one of the few animals which has a range from the time when the continents were together. The striped hyena and the honey badger are two examples of mammals which are found both in India and Africa, uh, in small pockets. So a very shy animal, a very secretive animal. But we, those of you who come with me to Ranthambore, sometimes if the conditions are right, we go out for night walks in Ranthambore after doing the tiger safaris. And occasionally there are these cattle dumping yards around our lodges in Ranthambore, because a lot of the community there don't eat beef, so the dead cattle are just dumped outside the village, and the hyenas come in good numbers to feed on them there. They're still very hard to see, but if we time it right and if we get there at the right moment, it is very possible to see. So striped hyenas are found all over India, but among the NatHab trips, one of the best places to see them is in Ranthambore, outside the park, among the cattle carcasses and the butcher shops. So it's not for everyone, but those who are keen to see it, it is a possibility on the summer tiger photography trip in India. What a stunning animal, huh? The black buck. It's a very beautiful animal. It has these stunning spiral horns, and a beautiful glossy black coat and a bright white belly, and a beautiful mask also on its face, which is white. What we don't know about this animal, a lot of people don't know, is that it is the fastest antelope in the world. Can you imagine that? The fastest antelope in the world. And this black buck is found all over India in the grasslands. Unfortunately, the grasslands are also the most fast disappearing habitat in India because they are being converted into farmland, into airports, into highways. So grasslands, forests are harder to convert as compared to grasslands. So the black buck is losing its past areas in India because of the dominance of development over grasslands. We still have a very good number between India and Pakistan. They can see them in the field. Even this picture, as you can see, it's in a tilled field and not in a national park. So this is sometimes on the way on the highway, sometimes even on the way to Agra to see the Taj. Sometimes you see them by the side of the highway. It's a very, very interesting animal to keep a lookout for. The black buck. This one again is a very, very, very rare animal. The largest mountain goat in the world. Uh, Not a sheep, but a large mountain goat. So it's called the Kashmir flare-horned markhor or the Kashmir markhor. It is found in a very small part of India and Pakistan, and another subspecies is found in Kyrgyzstan and Central Asia. So it has a very limited range amongst the coniferous forests of the Himalayas in the among craggy cliffs, and the males can get up to about 140 kilograms, which is very, very big for goats. So the ibex is the second largest, and the largest is the Kashmir markhor. They are also unfortunately heavily hunted throughout their range, but there are still possibilities to see them within India in Kashmir, the northernmost state of India, as the name suggests. But what is very interesting about the markhor is that it is, how do I put it? It is a goat, not a sheep. But how do we tell the difference between a goat and a sheep? I want you all to think of it in your heads. Try to come up with an answer. I'll give it 2 seconds. I'm not obviously going to hear your answer now, but I want to tell you that the most important thing to differentiate a goat from the sheep is that goats have goatees. That how like men have their beards, the goatee beard. Goats have goatees, which is the main difference. So you can see that the male goat has a goatee. So that is a key difference. Sheep don't have goatees. Just an interesting bit of trivia there. And of course, this is not for everyone. I'm not sure everyone's comfortable with this slide, but this is a Rotten's free-tail bat. And interestingly, this bat is the only one which is heavily protected by the Indian government. And we actually have a sanctuary dedicated to the protection of one colony of this bat because it is found only in two locations across the world. And one of the locations is in southern India in a cave, in a kind of like a network of caves in one particular area. And they've made that a wildlife sanctuary just to protect this beautiful free-tail bat called the Rotten's free-tail bat. So I'm going to rush through this because I'm not sure everyone will be comfortable looking at bats. But uh, as as a contradiction to the earlier bat, I just want to put this picture here. This is the painted bat, probably one of the most beautiful bats in the world. We get them all across South and Southeast Asia. We've also seen them on our Grand India tours. Occasionally, people see one in the lodge at night or one while on safari, flying about very slowly. The orange flash is unmistakable. And what is really interesting about these bats is they are able to roost inside large banana leaves. That is why they sleep during the day. So in areas, in parts of India where there are a lot of banana plantations, sometimes I go for walks, looking up at the banana trees from below, and occasionally you'll see a bat or two sleeping amongst those rolled up leaves, and it's a stunning bat to see. And another very, very interesting mammal from India. This is not from the ocean, but this is from one of our rivers in India. We actually see the Gangetic river dolphin in the Grand India tour, where we go on the boat on the Brahmaputra river. These are one of the three types of blind river dolphins in the world. One is, of course, the pink river dolphin in the Amazon, and the other one is the Gangetic river dolphin in India, and the third one is the Yangtze river dolphin in China. So this one again is entirely blind because it lives in murky waters of the river, depends entirely on echolocation to find its prey. and we see them just like sometimes they breach the surface in the evenings. That is when we see them, but otherwise it's very hard to see them underwater. This is a picture by a friend of mine, Yusuf, and I can't imagine how he managed to time it to such perfection because he's framed the moment really, really, really well. This dolphin again depends on movement of river fish up and down the river. So overfishing is an issue. Construction of dams is a big issue. And of course, in India with 1.3 billion people, a lot of our riverways are badly polluted, and there are very few areas where one can see them, like the Brahmaputra River in Assam, and other. Very interestingly, is a river called the Chambal, which is a tributary of the Ganges. And one of the reasons that Chambal still holds a very good population of dolphins is because in Hindu mythology, it's considered to be a cursed river. So no one wanted to settle around that river. So because of the myth that the river is cursed, no one lived around there or did farming or started factories or tanneries at the banks of the river. People just avoided that river. And because of that, there's a flourishing wildlife in that river. Maybe that's the key to saving our wildlife. Just say all forests are cursed, rivers are cursed, stay away from all of them, and maybe that'll bring back some wildlife like the Gangetic River dolphin. What you call manatees in the US, we call dugongs. I've never seen a manatee, so I don't know what the difference is. But these are dugongs. We get them all over South and Southeast Asia. And this is our national aquatic animal or marine mammal, national marine mammal of India. They are heavily dependent on what you see them feeding on in this picture, seagrass. So they feed on seagrass, which are found in certain parts of the Indian coastline, including the Andaman Islands. But there are very, very few of them left because of the poaching for meat. A lot of the coastal communities hunt them, and they taste very similar to beef. So they sell them as beef in the market. Slowly, conservation efforts are bringing them back, but the habitat loss of the seagrass because of building of ports, harbors. In fact, what is interesting is the areas where there are seagrass is actually one of the best areas to build ports and harbors. So, unfortunately, that directly affects the dugong populations in our country. But very, very beautiful, stunning animal, a very large mammal. I've never seen one. Amongst the list I've shown you till now, this is the only one I haven't seen till now, but hopefully I'll get to see someday. So we have a whole range of secretive mammals in India. Like you can see here, from the top left is the Nilgiri tar, a kind of mountain goat that we have in India. And then we have the small Travancore flying squirrel on the right. I'm going clockwise. And then you have the Pallas's cat on the top right, looking out from its den. A very, very stunning mammal which lives in the high altitudes of Ladakh, a small cat. And below that is the Indian wolf, which is dominates across the plains of India. Again, the same area as the black buck. And in the bottom, the serious looking lion-tailed macaque. It should be actually be called the lion-faced macaque because it has a mane like a lion, a very, very beautiful primate. And very interestingly, to the bottom left, we have a slow loris, a Bengal slow loris, like the Bengal tiger. And what is really interesting about the slow loris is that it is one of the few venomous mammals in the world. Can you imagine that? They actually have glands that secrete poison, and they rub themselves in that and also lick it, so that if you go too close to them or if an animal tries to eat them, they're poisonous to them. And if they bite you, they can transmit the poison through the bite. So they're actually one of the few mammals in the world which are poisonous and venomous. The slow loris hiding amongst the leaves. It is a slow animal, so it has to develop its best defense system. So I don't blame the animal, but it's still a very, very interesting fact. Look at these set of pictures. So when I talk about secretive animals, I'm not just talking about um, animals that are hard to see or you've not heard of. We also need to look at different forms of well-known animals. Do you know that the picture on the top left is a picture of actually a leopard? It is a normal leopard which some of you would have seen in Africa or India, but this is a strange color variation called a pseudo melanistic leopard, which you see on the top left. Below that, of course, is the black panther, which is also just a melanistic or an all black leopard. And to the right, very interesting, is a small population we have in eastern India of black tigers. So they are heavily black patched tigers. You can see there are two tigers in this picture. The one in the back has a normal pattern, and the one in front is a melanistic tiger or a heavily black pigmented tiger. So we have very interesting albinistic, melanistic animals showing up here and there. But according to me, the tiger and the leopard, the pseudo-melanistic leopard, are really, really interesting uh, uh, specimens of the animal which you don't encounter very, very often. So I want to just discuss in detail a few of the mammals. So my first one is in the eastern Himalayas in Singalila National Park, which borders Bhutan and Nepal. It's in India, but it's in the eastern Himalayas. And this is the kind of habitat. It is broadleaf oak forests, lots of bamboo, lots of kiwi trees, and lots of fruiting trees, very dense evergreen, very steep slopes. It's a very hard area to navigate, but we do go there often because we get to see this stunning animal, which is a red panda. A red panda looks like a red raccoon, but it is feeds entirely on bamboo, which is why it gets its name, the red panda. It is a fiery orange animal which lives in these dense jungles, and it is an icon of the eastern Himalayas, according to me. This is the range of the red panda from China to Nepal to India to Bhutan. This is the range. Somewhere in the middle in India is where we go to see them in Singalila National Park. But of course, you have a very good chance of seeing them in Bhutan also on the NATHAB Nepal Bhutan tour. So this is the kind of habitat which we access through a day of driving, and then we stay with a local team of trackers and go looking for them in these jungles. So it's not very easy to look for them. This is me and a group of my friends looking for the red panda the first time we went there. We had to do a lot of walking, a lot of tracking, because finding this animal, despite it being so red, it hides very well. It lives high up in the trees. So how do you find it? So we have to look for fresh droppings, tracks, then look for feeding signs, look for where it is, where it could build a nest. So it's a nest building animal. So it builds a nest to sleep. So we try to find a fresh nest where the leaves haven't dried off too much. So it's a lot of interesting things that go into finding this animal. Not every animal can be tracked the same way. You have to look at really deeply understand these secretive animals to know how to find them in our jungles. This is how they look. They have we've also The trackers have also managed to identify them based on their facial patterns. Some of them have very contrasty markings, some of them have very diffuse markings, but every time you see one, I've seen quite a few now thanks to the team of trackers there. But it's a very, very beautiful animal to see, and photographically also so stunning. Very cute, very, very cute, stunning animal. Almost feels like it's a defenseless animal, but I think the defense is the habitat. It lives in such steep slopes that it's hard to get to even for carnivores. And we're talking about carnivores. The main predator is the yellow-throated marten that you see on the left. This animal is the main predator of the red panda because they're very agile in steep slopes and tall trees. But luckily, they also feed on birds. But when they do come across a red panda, very often they go for it also. They're very aggressive, very fast animals, the yellow-throated marten. And I every time we see a marten, we hope it doesn't get to a panda because we kind of uh, have a soft corner for the red pandas, but that is nature's way. And that's the meanest looking panda I could manage. They look so cute in all the pictures that I had to find an angle or a kind of light where they could look mean, and I had to put that into. Sorry about that. The next animal, talking about the yellow-throated marten of the Himalayas, is the Nilgiri marten, which is found in southern India in the Western Ghats. Very beautiful white lip, like a white jawline almost, dark on the back, and a bright yellow throat and forelegs is the key for this. Probably one of the rarest mammals in India because you see them so less, but even roaming the jungle so many times. I live in an area where you have Nilgiri martens, and I've seen them just once till date. So this is the global range of Nilgiri martens. In the map to the left, you can see how they are found only in these pockets in southern India. And to the right, you can see where there are confirmed reports of Nilgiri martens. There are probably just about 600 to 1,000 left in the wild. In these high mountains, they live and they hunt amongst the trees and the high slopes of these mountains, always on the move, very hard to see. This is the kind of habitat they live in, these valley forests and grasslands on the hilltops, and they hunt almost anything they can find. Deer is not difficult. Birds, squirrels, bats. We've seen them take centipedes. They go for honeybees. They go for fruit. They eat everything they can. Very active, very voracious appetite, and very aggressive animals. I also known stories of them chasing hikers when they come across them. They can't cause much harm, but they do pack a punch with their bite and how fast they are. And this just a series of images to give you an idea of what kind of an animal it is. And if I ever see one, I've never seen one this well. I've seen one quite well, but not this well. Hopefully someday I'll also have pictures like these of my own. That is my picture. I still cherish this moment. I got to see this animal in my front yard. Strangely, after 5 years of searching for it in the jungles, I was having lunch, and one day this one just trotted by my front yard at home, and I couldn't believe it. I walked miles and miles and miles through the jungle, set up camera traps, never found a marten, and finally found one in my front yard. So that's the story of how I found it. So that's wildlife for you. I mean, you think you're doing everything right. Probably all you need to do is come and have lunch with me, and it might help you find a Nilgiri marten. Such a beautiful animal, very poorly understood, very poorly studied. We don't know much about it, except that it shows up here and there and then disappears back into the jungle, just like all the other secretive mammals do. These are some of the animals that the Nilgiri marten preys on. Mouse deer on the top left, jungle fowl, giant squirrels, and of course primates. The one on the bottom left is the Nilgiri langur, and it is not beyond them to hunt large monkeys as well. So these are the kind of prey that the Nilgiri marten feeds on in southern India. And these are some of the endemic mammals of southern India as well. These monkeys are stunning, right? The Nilgiri langurs, the golden mane and the fully glossy black coat. They're probably one of my most favorite primates in the world of what I've seen till now. This is a very interesting encounter we had with the marten. Not when I say we, it's a bunch of friends of mine who I'm very jealous of, not me. They managed to go into tree hollows and hunt the bats that were roosting inside those hollows. So this is what this pair of martens were doing, and my friends got to see it for a few hours, and then they disappeared back into the jungle. How like really stunning animals. Just look at the white jawline, the yellow, and the black. Such simple characters. In fact, I'm going to go back to this slide. A lot of people don't even know that the Nilgiri marten exists because of the bottom right picture. They all get confused with the giant squirrel because it looks similar in the jungle when it's moving through the canopy. It looks like a marten. So a lot of people just think, no, it's just giant squirrels here, no martens. So a lot of times martens are mistaken for giant squirrels. So we have very poor data even from the local community who live in these jungles. So one of the best places to see them is in southern India in Pambadam Shola National Park. When I say it's one of the best places to see them, probably 10 people in the entire year get to see them, which is still a good number going by the Martin standards. But it is a beautiful Shola dense evergreen forest where there are a few trails which people can walk on. And if lucky, if all the stars align, you may get to see a marten here. So coming to cats, this is a very cool little cat. It's called the rusty spotted cat. I can see the rust colored spots on its flanks. But what is really interesting about this cat is that it is also the smallest wild cat in the world. It is half the size of a kitten. It's very small. It lives in tree hollows, comes out at night, hunts small lizards, mice, grasshoppers, and then disappears back into the trees, into the hollows during the day. A very, very beautiful animal. And another very interesting fact about the rusty spotted cat is that it is the only cat species that is endemic to the Indian subcontinent. All other cat species are found outside India, outside in China, Southeast Asia, everywhere. But this is the only cat that is endemic to the Indian subcontinent. So this is the global range of the rusty spotted cat between India and Sri Lanka. This is where they are found in like forested areas and also in the edges of forests where they're able to find prey. This is a camera trap image of a rusty spotted cat. I feel the rust colored spots are better seen in this picture. And you can also see the size comparison between the cat and a small mouse. And that is how big the cat actually is. So, one of the key things to remember when you look at small cats, even across the world, is that small cats tend to hybridize a lot with domestic cats, especially outside forest areas, because domestic cats cross with them very easily. So if you don't notice all the important features of the small cat, then you may mistake a hybrid cat to be the actual wild cat. So you have to look at the ears, the kind of cylindrical tail that they have, the stripes inside their feet, the markings on the face, the rusty spots, how they're arranged, because this cat could mate with a domestic cat and produce a very similar cat looking to like a rusty spotted cat, but it could probably be a big cat, or it could not have stripes where it's supposed to have stripes. So things could be different. So it's very important to keep a close eye when you try and identify small cats. So a size comparison between a tiger and a rusty spotted cat on the top right. And this is my favorite encounter with a rusty spotted cat. And imagine that I managed to find two kittens of the rusty spotted cat. So they felt like two small mice on the tree. That's the size. They were there. I only found them because the mother was below the tree and refused to move from the tree, even though I was very close. So I realized there is something she didn't want to move away from. So I checked the tree and I found these kittens. I managed one or two pictures before I left them where they were. But this is the only time I've seen kittens so small of the smallest cat in the world. So imagine that it's a very, very, very tiny kittens. It's hard to put that into a perspective of a photograph, but yes, it is very, very interesting. Unfortunately, again, a small cat very often is ignored by conservation. It is always the big cats that we speak about. So hybridization, like I mentioned earlier, is an issue because a lot of these cats live at the forest edge because they're more easy for them to survive amongst fields and forests than in true forests because there's a lot of mice, lizards, human food sources, human shelters that they can use. But unfortunately, because of that, there is a lot of conflict. That conflict, as in they, I'm not talking about like human conflict. I'm talking about conflict for themselves, like in terms of uh, coming too close to humans, getting hit by vehicles, affected by development, losing habitat. So all of these factors are affecting rusty spotted cats and all other wild cats. In fact, do you know that in India we have 16 species of cats? In the entire continent of Africa, we have 10 cat species. In India only, we have 16 cat species, out of which there are 5 big cats, 6 big cats, and 10 small cats. Africa has 3 big cats and 7 small cats. How interesting is that? And this is another very interesting picture of the rusty spotted cat, which we found in a boat on a river. And the night, probably the rusty spot cat managed to go into the boat, probably trying to run away from a predator like an owl or something, and hid in the boat. And the next morning, when we were out birding on the boat, we found a rusty spotted cat under one of the seats. So we had to like rescue it and put it back into the jungle. But that is the closest I've been to a wild rusty spotted cat. In fact, on our Ranthambore tour, outside the lodges, there is a chance to see them when they come out of the forest to feed on mice and rats. That is a very good time to look for them in the night. It is a very special encounter. In the daytime, someone's Harsha, a friend of mine, he managed to get a picture of two kittens and a mother on safari in the jungle, which is not very, very commonly seen. So a very very different kind of mammal we're going to talk about. It's called the dancing deer. I'll talk about why it's called the dancing deer. But this is the sangai, or the brow antlered deer. And what is interesting about the sangai is that it lives in a floating national park. I'll explain all this. It might all sound strange when I first say it, but the sangai live in this area in eastern India only, which is basically a lake. So this is a deer which lives in a lake. It lives in an aquatic ecosystem. But the aquatic ecosystem actually looks like this. So here, because of the algal growth and the aquatic vegetation, they form these islands, which are floating islands. So you can actually push an entire island away with your feet. So if you actually go into the lake and find an island, you can push it away. The entire island will float away. Some of them as big as 2, 3 football fields can be pushed away by you. It's not difficult at all. So that is the kind of floating islands. And in these floating islands, you find brow antler deer. So when the islands are mature, they form larger islands. And in these islands are these beautiful deer which feed on this aquatic vegetation. They dance around because they cannot put too much pressure on the ground. They also have splayed hooves to make sure that they don't sink into the island. And once again, I just wanted to show you the habitat, some pictures of the habitat. In fact, some of these, as you can see, are not just natural processes. The fishermen in the area also, what they do is they kind of lock this vegetation together to trap fish, and this indirectly leads to the creation of more islands. So this is actually a constantly growing national park called Kebul Lamjau National Park. And in this national park, some of the islands are big, like really big. And how we go exploring these islands is we get on these small boats, these narrow boats, which are owned by the forest department. And from these boats, we go into these narrow gullies. And if the islands are moving too close to each other, all you have to do, like I told you, is push them away, and the gully opens up, and we keep going. That's basically how you explore this national park. And then there are some watchtowers where we go and scan for these deer because they blend in so well amongst these islands. They're very hard to see. But when you do see them, you see them like this. Some females in the picture to the left, and on the right, you can see this beautiful male with this brow antler that he has, typical brow antler. Very, very small population of this deer left in the wild. And what is very cool is they also do a dancing display during their rutting season. They decorate their antlers with grass, and then they hop around in the grasslands to impress the females. So, which is also why it's called the dancing deer. But what you should remember is its actual name, which is the Sangai, Sangai, Sangai. And it's a very range restricted deer found only in one national park in the world. And interestingly, that one national park is a floating national park. Apart from the Sangai, in that national park, we also see other very interesting animals like hog deer in the bottom left, fishing cats on the top left, and we also very sometimes get a very interesting owl called the eastern grass owl. So these are all other interesting species that you find in that floating national park. But to be honest, just going and seeing that floating national park is an experience in itself. It's a very remote place, not easy to get to, which is why we don't do it as on part of our tours. But because I live in India, I get to go explore these places through my friends and local contacts, and we rough it out, and we get to see some very very interesting habitats like that within India. Last but not the least, how many of you knew that we have brown bears in India? And interestingly, this brown bear is found in the areas where we go look for snow leopards, but a little further from there in the Himalayas. This is the Himalayan brown bear. So brown bears are actually found all across the northern hemisphere, from Alaska till Russia, and the one of the smaller subspecies are found in India, in the Himalayas. One is the Syrian brown bear, and the other one is the Himalayan brown bear. We have a very very good population of brown bears. This is the range of brown bears in Asia, and you can see that the red is a Himalayan brown bear, and the green is the Tibetan brown bear. And above that, on the top, is a European brown bear, and the Kamchatka brown bear, and the Japanese brown bear that you see in the northern areas. and the southernmost areas, the dark red and the dark green, is the Himalayan brown bear and the Tibetan brown bear. So very interestingly, like what is different about seeing brown bears in India as compared to seeing brown bears back in Alaska or Denali? Of course, you get to see them much closer in Denali. You see them fishing salmon. You go to Alaska to see them. NatHab does fantastic trips over there. But what is interesting for us in India is that we see brown bears coming out of hibernation because we are already at a very high altitude where we see the brown bears. They don't, like how it happens in the US, they don't go high up to the Rockies to hibernate and they descend in the summer, and that's when you see them. You don't actually see them hibernating in because they're so high up in the Rockies, but we tend to see them hibernating. And like this big male, he was coming out of hibernation, allowed this female who came out of hibernation with her two young ones, and we get to see it like on a daily basis because we also are in the same altitude as them. We don't have to climb very high. We are already at around 3,500 meters above sea level, and that is where we find these brown bears. And what do they do? The first thing they do when they come out of hibernation after 5 months of sleeping, they're very, very hungry. So what they do is they come straight into the villages and create havoc. So the 2 months after their hibernation or 1 month after their hibernation is a very, very there's a lot of conflict during that time. We do a lot of conservation work over there, and now tourism is also starting, trying to sensitize the villagers to the importance of brown bears. But the truth of the matter is, we also need to make sure the conflict is reduced. The brown bears aren't killing the livestock, they're not raiding people's larders, they shouldn't be doing all that, but you can't blame them because they're so hungry. But there has to be some deterrent to make them look for natural food sources. So it is a very interesting, very difficult situation to manage because you can't deny the brown bear its food as well as you can't deny people their livelihoods. So tourism is probably something that is going to hopefully bridge this gap. But very, very interesting animals. If you go stay in any of these villages, you will see brown bear tracks entering the village in the night and leaving the village in the morning. You'll see the tracks all over, and if you go follow the tracks, you get to see brown bears. There's very, very good numbers of these brown bears in the Himalayas. Not very easy to see. Here you can see the big town in the back and tracks of the brown bear, which we were following since morning. We were just following it. So the mother and the two cubs had gone into the village, had their fill, and they're going back to their dens in the morning. And this is the kind of landscape where we see them. And interestingly, in the same landscape, we also see snow leopards and Tibetan wolves and everything. So it's like this really interesting place in the Himalayan north in northern India. This is how fat they become before hibernation. So just to go, going to go back. You can see how thin the female to the left is in this image, and then if you go to the right, you can see how fat they become by the time November comes, which is autumn, before winter sets in, and they sleep again for 5 months. This is very, very interesting. This is again a big male in November before hibernating. You can see how fat his neck is, how fat his belly is. They feed on everything they can find, a lot of grasses and sedges. They fatten themselves up so that they can sleep for 5 months without getting hungry. So this is the kind of landscape that the brown bears live in, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place in the Himalayas. I don't think there's some parts of the Himalayas which I don't think there are any prettier places in the world. I'm sure each of us has our own favorite place. But according to me, the brown bears are not just secretive. Even the place where they live is secretive. It's not known to many people in the world, and this is how it looks, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Every time I've gone there, I've been gone there looking for brown bears, but I just go there and stare at the landscapes. That is how stunning the area is, and I just feel like watching brown bears is just a bonus to going and seeing those places. So with that, I'd like to end my talk on India's secretive mammals. I hope you all enjoyed it, and hopefully there'll be some interesting questions that I can answer. Over to you, Rob.
All Thank you, Surya. Now, before we start with the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in your GoToWebinar control panel. And if you're interested in traveling to India with NatHab, you can visit our website at nathab.com. TIMECODES.com for trip details or call us at 800-543-8917 to speak with an adventure specialist. All right, let's get to some of these questions. So, is the civet a cat?
No. So the civet is not a cat. Civet is its own family called viverids. Okay, like cats are felids, civets come under their own group called viverids, and they are placed there obviously because they have short legs and they look slightly different. They have long dog-like faces, but the most important difference is they have a gland which from which they secrete a particular kind of smelly substance which is used to make perfumes. That gland is missing in cats. So they're they're superficially like cats, but if you take a closer look, civets are their own group of animals.
Great, thank you. So,
Mhm.
can you tell us how big the marten and the red panda are?
Well, the red panda is literally a size of a large raccoon, maybe slightly larger. I've not seen too many raccoons in my life. I've only saw one when I came to Boulder, so I don't know much about raccoons. But the one I saw was much smaller, not much smaller, slightly smaller. So red panda will get about 12 to 15 kilograms. It's a very bushy, large animal, like the size of uh, size of a bulldog, one could say. And the marten is a similar sized animal, but more slender, more sleek, not so furry. It has very short fur. It is built for speed and agility, whereas the red panda is built for cuddling. It's like that kind of difference. So about I would say around between 8 to 12 kilograms. A marten, a red panda would be slightly more. They get to about 3 to 3 feet long from head to tail, maybe 3.5 feet for a larger one. That should roughly give you the dimensions. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. So, what what is the brown bear's primary source of food that keeps it away from the livestock?
Well, unfortunately, brown bears, when they come out of hibernation, the entire landscape is still covered in snow, right? So they do feed on grasses, flowers, roots, sedges, tubers, fruits, everything. But all those things actually appear only a month later when the snow melts. So what happens is when they come out of hibernation, there is a very high possibility they're coming out of hibernation early because they know there's food in the village. They can survive on that for a month before feeding on wild food. So it is a very interesting catch-22 situation which we don't know what to do about. Because if the village wasn't there, the brown bears will probably sleep for one more month till the snow melts. But now, because of the presence of the village, there is a possibility that they're waking up early because they know they can get to the village and find food.
Are the villagers allowed to kill the brown bears that attack the
No,
livestock?
no, no. No one is allowed to kill any wildlife in India. Hunting in any form is illegal unless it is that one particular animal is deemed a threat to a civilian population. Then only the forest department or the wildlife services are allowed to come and put it down. No civilian can cause any harm to any wildlife in India. That's the
Great,
rule.
thank you for letting us know about that. That's a good rule to have.
Hmm.
Um, So the in the last picture of the rusty spotted cat, it looked like the ear skin was almost transparent with light coming through that. Was that just is that true or is that an optical illusion?
No, I just think it's an optical illusion. Yes, cats have very thin ears, and also that picture was taken in the peak of the summer heat. So probably the cats are also shedding a lot of their unnecessary fur not to ensure they don't get too warmed up inside. But having said that, something very interesting about rusty spotted cat's ears is that it's such an active animal at night that it has small ears but with large earlobes. So let me, if I may, I'd like to go back to that picture quickly. Um, yeah, can you see that? It has small ears but large earlobes. So if you look at this picture, you can see how small the ears are, but they have such large earlobes because they overheat very fast because of how active they are at night, and because of that, they need to dissipate heat. And unlike us humans, these hairy animals don't sweat. So dogs pant and wag their tails to get rid of the heat. cats have long tails to get rid of heat, but apart from that, they also have these big earlobes through which they can get rid of excess body heat. So that is an interesting fact about the ears. But no, if you're talking about this picture, it is just backlight that's coming through. So it's translucent, yes, because they have very less hair behind the ear, but I don't think it is like a norm.
Great. Thank you, Surya. So
Mhm.
let's talk about Rotten's free-tailed bat for a second.
Sure.
Where other than the sanctuary in South India can we find them?
Thailand. I know there is a place in Thailand where you can see them, the rotten sweet-tailed bat, and that's it. There's one cave in South India and one cave in Thailand. That's as far as what I know is there at the moment.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mhm.
So, do bats urinate while they roost?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. They do urinate when where they roost. Obviously, they have to, but not all bats tend to urinate on themselves to stay cool. Some bats do, but some bats fly around when they urinate, so that because bats hang upside down, right? As gross as it sounds, when they urinate hanging upside down, it is going to flow on their body. But some bats tend to use it as a cooling off system because they don't necessarily, all bats don't necessarily roost in caves. Some of them roost in trees where it can get pretty hot. But a lot of the smaller bats which roost in caves and old buildings, they tend to fly around and urinate or poop to ensure that they don't dirty themselves. So yes, they do urinate where they roost, but it doesn't mean they do it on themselves.
Gotcha. Thank you. So, what does the Indian government do to the people who are buying and selling the skins of endangered animals?
Well, it is absolutely illegal. There are strict legal procedures, but it is not. Okay, let me put it this way: it is not as bad a crime as murder. It is probably as bad a crime as theft. Okay, so people can go in to prison for 5 years. They may get bail earlier, and all of these guys who are involved in the wildlife racket have a lot of powerful people behind them. So they have good lawyers who can bail them out. So it is not, the laws are there, but it's always the implementation of the laws that are the issue. I'll put it that way. The laws are there, but it's just the implementation of the laws that are the issue. And I think that's what the issue is with regards to poaching laws in India. To be honest, Rob, I'll also like to tell the person who's asked this question is that poaching is not our biggest problem. As much as the world likes to think poaching is a big problem in India, it is a problem everywhere in the world, but it's not our biggest problem. Our biggest problem is space. We have 1.3 billion people. Where do you have space for wildlife? Their people need food, they need better lifestyle, they all now want iPhones, they want roads, they want to have shelters. Everything takes resources, and when you and if you and me are allowed to have a good comfortable life, we shouldn't deny anyone that life. uh, so it's not fair to say that, oh, the planet is now dying, so uh, I want you to stay poor, or you don't need a phone, or you don't need a bike or a car. You continue walking for the next 3 generations, right? You can't say that. So it's a very unfair uh, problem. But the truth of the matter is the brunt of the problem is faced by the wildlife because of our numbers and our population, and that is our biggest problem. So if we can figure out a way around that, then yes, we have a future for our wildlife. So poaching, yes, is a problem. Pangolin poaching is a very serious problem. I do not deny that. But in general, our bigger problem is the numbers of people that we have and the disparity in the population when it comes to the rich being extremely rich and the poor being really poor. And when they get desperate, people go to any extremes to make money. So it's a very, very normal human problem.
Great. Thank you, Surya, for that very thoughtful answer. Unfortunately, that will be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'd like to hand it back to you for your closing comments.
Well, going back to the topic of the presentation, seeing tigers, snow leopards, rhinos, elephants is all very, very good. It's really exciting. Even we love doing that. But every time you go on a trip anywhere in the world with NatHab, please make sure you ask your experienced expedition leaders um, where or what they else they can find on these trips. Where can they look for interesting wildlife? And I'm sure the tour leader will be very excited to find you some animals when you ask that question. It might involve some late nights, it might involve some rough terrain, it might involve a little hardship, but you will be able to see a few more animals than the rest of the group because you asked that question. We all have animals that we want to show you, but we just need you to be interested in that. So please make sure you ask the question, and I'm sure there's always some interesting, cool animal or bird or bat or insect or frog, anything around that can be pointed out to you and revealed. Thank you.
Surya, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. Now, please join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude today's webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.